So, I'm Cynthia, and yesterday I went at a laugh comedy show in Westlands, and someone asked me what I studied in my PhD, and I just realized I'm ready to talk about it because for quite some time I'd shut down that part of my life because of all the post PhD trauma and all the fatigue that I've just accumulated for 8 to 9 years trying to come up with to publish 3 papers, do a thesis that was about 200 pages long. So there was a lot going on, and then I was repatriating back to Kenya, so trying to settle down. But now I'm ready to talk about it. So I studied my PhD at a university in China called the University of Science and Technology of China. It was a full sponsored opportunity, fully sponsored, everything catered for. And my thesis was on the impact of customer mistreatment on employee counterproductive work behavior through anger. And I had 3 moderators. One of them was perspective taking, another one was on power, sense of power, and the third one was on power distance. And I used 3 theories. My overarching theory was cognitive appraisal theory, but the supporting theories, one of them was attachment theory, and the second one was affective events theory. So let me start with the theories and why I used them. So because I was initially interested in transforming family of origin wounds, I started investigating the attachment theory to see where it all begins. Like, why do some people just feel they have this sense of heaviness in their body, but there is nothing major has ever happened in their life? So it all starts in the attachment theory. Some of these can come from the energy you absorb from your mom, or when your child, the caregivers around you, what energy are they sharing with you? So if you're raised in a big family and maybe you're a middle child, then you'll be surrounded by, you'll always be clamoring for attention from your caregiver. But if you're an only child, then you get all the attention. So all this will come out differently when you're sitting with someone. So that is attachment theory. And then I moved to affective events theory. So I've mentioned 2 things. You were born in a large family, like many kids. So there are some events, maybe you cried out to your caregiver and they didn't respond immediately. So that's an event. And it leads to an emotion which you can't explain at that time as a kid. So most of the time it's fear, anger, shame, and guilt. In many kids, these are the 4 discrete emotions that come up. But as you grow, they become something else. As you grow older, it can turn to sadness, or it can turn to frustration. So these 4 emotions, these 4 emotions grow into something bigger. So after I'd investigated affective events theory, I had to connect it. So this was in the applied psychology way. But because I had transitioned, I wanted to transition from applied psychology to organization behavior and applied and human resource management. I had to find aspects of an organization that fit into the affective events theory. So I understand the child psychology, but I want to relate it to how this person grows up in the long run, how they'll respond at the workplace. So affective events theory always measures your satisfaction at work. So an event occurred in your childhood, teenage, in your university days, but now you're at work. All those experiences are coming together, and you can see how you're relating with people based on how or where you grew up, how you were treated in school, how you were treated in group settings as a teenager, and then how your college experience, where you went to college, and now your job searching experience and finding a job. So all these things, we measure the satisfaction at the first job you get. Like, are you satisfied with the salary? Are you satisfied with your colleagues? Are you satisfied with everything? And then So once I understood everything about affective events and how it relates to the attachment theory, I had to find a way to explain why when someone gets a negative experience at work, some of them respond in fear, others respond in anger, others respond in shame, others respond in guilt. So why? Okay, sometimes it's a journey. It starts off as a high intensity emotion like anger, and then it transitions to low intensity emotions like sadness. So all this I'm doing through experiments. So in a year, I would do maybe 50 experiments. Some experiments I could simulate, some experiments I had to do, like go into the field and just ask people random questions to trigger different emotions and then hear their feedback, like why did they respond. And then sometimes we had to do actual experiment, like you go in a lab and someone gets all the cables and we try saying certain words and we see which part of your body is lighting up and try to relate it to an emotion. So that aside, the only way to explain why people respond differently, why I'm getting different emotions, was to introduce a new theory called cognitive appraisal theory. But this is such an old theory, so I decided it's going to be my overarching theory. Because in the cognitive appraisal theory, I can still see aspects of affective events theory, attachment theory, and many other management theories can be explained through cognitive appraisal theory. So it's been updated over time, but the basics of cognitive appraisal theory is that when there is an event, you either appraise it through there'll be the primary appraisal, the initial appraisal, and then the secondary appraisal, like what happens after. So I've said you're in a workplace, but in your workplace, you're mixture of all your experiences over time. So there is a way you will respond based on how or where you are raised, based on how you are treated in school, based on your teenage cliques, based all these things come at your workplace. So your supervisor gives you a negative feedback. And from home, you're told if you come here with a grade other than an A, you're a failure. So which triggers shame. So in your primary appraisal, there'll be shame. But because you're at the workplace, you can't just cower down and hide yourself in as a response to shame. You have to respond in a way that is acceptable for the workplace. So in some aspects, you'll try to ask for more feedback. So that thing that triggers you to ask for feedback or ways to improve, that is your secondary appraisal. Because in your secondary appraisal is about survival, like how do I survive this? I can't just respond in a way that I used to respond around my caregivers. I have to find another way to survive and keep my job. And from there, now the outcome was counterproductive work behavior. So after your secondary appraisal, you ask your supervisor for feedback, and your supervisor just brushes it off like, you'll never make it, or I'm putting you on a PIP, like a performance improvement plan. Then it leads to counterproductive behavior. Counterproductive behavior will include things like psychological detachment, like you just show up at work, but you're not doing much, you're not giving any ideas, you're not excited about your workplace. And then it can also lead to you trying to harass people around you. So anyone who shows any proactiveness, you'll shun them. You're like, oh, you're just trying to simp, you're just trying to be nice to the boss, like, why are you doing that? Why can't you just do your work and go home? So there'll be that. And then another form of counterproductive behavior is now actual physical violence, because you don't know how to self-regulate. So you try to be aggressive to someone who has little impact or little decision making on your job. So it's called displaced aggression, where you find someone you feel is lower than you and you just dump all that energy on you. So different forms of counterproductive behavior. So because I was using cognitive appraisal theory, so the recommended way in applied psychology, we try to mitigate the primary appraisal. So we don't want you to go to a negative emotion. We want you to go to a positive emotion to minimize counterproductive behavior. So from here, I introduced the power distance. Power distance is how close or far you feel to power. Like how is it for you to approach your supervisor in advance before the appraisal and ask for feedback? Or how easy it is for your supervisor to walk up to your desk and tell you, oh, Cynthia, I've noticed that your report had so many grammatical errors. What is going on? Do you need extra tools? So that means the power distance is short. But if you have to make an appointment, you have to wait a few days, you have to do this before you even access your supervisor, then the power distance is so high. So if I can convince the supervisors to have a low power distance, like continuous feedback, instead of waiting for 3 months, 6 months to give you feedback, then it minimizes the primary appraisal. Another way is to convince the subordinate, because for me, I was looking at all the players, from all the perspectives. So there is the supervisor's perspective, minimize the power distance. There is the employee. The employee, through the supervisor can empower them by giving them autonomy. Like, make any decision, but if you're stuck, then come to me. Like, do whatever feels right for you. Explore, talk to people, like, do whatever feels right for you. But when you're stuck or you're in need of any resources, come and talk to me immediately. You can text me, you can email me, you can call me. If you meet me on the corridor, you can ask me directly. We don't need to do the emails, the seminars, and all that. So through this empowerment, you're boosting the employee's sense of power. And then there's the part where I ask the employee to change their perspective, that this negative feedback has nothing to do with them. So I try to minimize their shame or guilt by telling them that whatever they are feeling has nothing to do. It's just, appraisal is just a part of the process, a part of a HR process. It has nothing to do with them. So they shouldn't take it, like, it shouldn't mess up their day or affect their whole life, or they shouldn't feel like, oh, I need to retaliate, I need to do this so that this person can know who I am. So these 3 moderators, just to help. And then at the second stage, I can still introduce sense of power, another sense of power, because there are 3 types of power. So if I can also boost your sense of power before the secondary appraisal, so that because I asked you to do whatever you do and come to me, so before the secondary appraisal, this person can feel like, oh, I have books, I have buddies, I have my supervisor, I have all the 5 Bs, I have access. So now, before I start feeling bad about it, then I can go back to the 5 Bs, check in a book, ask a buddy, do the bits and bobs, all that. I can talk to them, and then minimize my second appraisal. So I'm giving them even more options, and then it minimizes counterproductive theory. So this was about my research. And why did I choose on this? So psychology has always fascinated me, and initially I thought it's just a straightforward thing, like getting a psychology degree, I'll be a psychologist. So initially that was my mindset. I started working on this emotion called O. I liked O because it's complex. O has all the aspects of positive and negative, so I don't have the duality. So with O, there's fear, there's happiness, there's joy, there's anger. All these are part of O. So the things that feed into O is people, like celebrities. When you see a celebrity, there is, oh yeah, Kipchoge can run so fast, he's now in my hometown, like what we saw recently when he went to visit that school along State House Road. And then there is an O when you see a beautiful building or nature, like just something inanimate. You just look at them and you're like, wow, this is so beautiful, this is awesome. And then there is O that is related to God. When you say, oh, God is so awesome, it's like we have all this understanding that we're just a small part in the universe, but God gave us this opportunity to experience everything. So that's O. And then there is O where you feel like when you feel there's a traumatic event that happened, there was an attack, so you feel O. But now this is the other side of O, called awfulness. You'll be shocked, you'll feel fear, you'll sweat, you'll panic, you'll do what. So there was that O. And why I was studying this in psychology, it's because initially I was studying marketing, a lot of marketing material, and they were just experimenting different aspects of emotion to see how best to package their goods. Like if you're starting up a social media tool, you would want to know which emotion would make people to stay longer on your app. Or if you want to package a product, you'd want to know which emotion fascinates a certain age group. So if there are people who are already at the joy stage of their life, like they're just happy, like it's okay, anything, as long as my soap is home, I can shower, no big deal. So you know how well which colors go with that. So after studying O, but when I was doing experiment, the thing that the O experience that had the highest impact was the religious, because many of the people I was interviewing were strongly inclined in their religion. So it was so hard to convince them to think otherwise. Like it was strongly ingrained in them from a young age. So the results were always biased, and I couldn't continue with this because for generalizability, I need to find a variable that can work either way, like I can't just say, oh, in religion this is the ultimate final decision. Like as long as there is God, God showed up to Paul as a big light and he fell down, like that's okay, but there's no way I can replicate that in an experiment. I can't just put someone in a room and show them a big light and they fall down. So there was an aspect of replicability, and yet religion had the highest impact on many of my outcomes. So I had to drop O because of the religious, spiritual aspect. And so I moved, because O had all the aspects of fear, anger, shame, guilt. I decided to just study these emotions separately without the complexity of O. But I always said, after my PhD, I'll really focus on O, I'll really publish. And it was very great because, like it just takes you somewhere, and the literature is fascinating on this topic. But, you have to graduate, so you find a topic that you don't have to keep having these heated discussions with your supervisor. Hi, Professor Derek. So, and also because of the place I was studying my PhD, all these sensitive topics were not encouraged. Anything related to politics, religion, anything that would seem like I'm imposing my values on someone were discouraged. So professor was just like, there's so much going on with the Buddhist community, there's so much going on with Muslims, so having such a topic would not go well with the reviewers, especially the local reviewers at the place. So I moved to this new, and when I was transitioning from O to now the other emotions, I think at some point I had an emotional breakdown because I had invested so much in O, and just separating them just seemed like so boring, but I had to do it for my graduation. So after a while, of course, I managed. I started off with anger. I published a paper on that, and then I tried to combine different aspects of the organization. So I tapped into the dark triad. I studied abusive supervision. Abusive supervision combines all aspects of the dark triad. It combines sociopathy, narcissism, Machiavellism. All these dark triad personalities are combined into abusive supervision. And I see, and it's obvious, if you are around an abusive supervisor, you'll be angry all the time, and you're likely to show counterproductive behavior. So I just to see. So a sense of power will not work. Boosting the employee's sense of power will not work. Reducing the power distance will not work. So it's only about perspective taking. Now it's just to teach the employees on what is abusive supervision and why these dark triad personalities behave the way they want, why they grab all the power, why they what, and try to give them ways to cope with that as they find another job or another way to just keep off from the supervisor, because it has a huge mental toll on you. And so I also did customer mistreatment. So, and of course, negative feedback was my first, but negative feedback, the intensity was so low, and the time between appraisals in many organizations was too long. It's very rare to find an organization that has like an agile way of managing feedback. So it was so hard to measure it, and doing it an experiment, their correlations were so low, so not so impactful, not so interesting to publish. So I just moved to something with a high intensity, like customer mistreatment. It's frequent on the daily. You can get so many responses, and it's easy to just compare, especially when you're doing a longitudinal study of, because my PhD was about, like, since I started working on this, it was about 4 years. So you have to keep collecting data over all that time to just see if there's anything change. And this was really good because during the COVID season, there was an increase in customer mistreatment, but the trigger was their limitations, the restrictions related to COVID. So it was a good way to also investigate other aspects of customer mistreatment that are not directly just linked to the customer. They're linked to external factors like the pandemic and all that. So that was my PhD. If you're interested in my PhD stories, or if you're struggling with any aspects of your PhD, I'd love to have a sitting. I came up with a mini workbook that can help you kickstart your research process and give you a bit of independence away from your supervisor, because initially my biggest mistake was I was highly dependent on my supervisor. So I would do something and try to imagine, like, what would he say about this order? And my supervisor didn't like. He just wanted to throw you in the deep sea and see if you can swim. So if you have this workbook that I'm sharing, it can give you talking points. When you meet them, you tell them, like, oh, this is my perspective. I feel if I go this direction, it will be easier to collect data. It will be easier to analyze. I feel like doing so many experiments, because many of my experiments would backfire, and I would do so many experiments, close to 20 experiments a month, and half of them would just be like trash. Like, I can use it for analysis, I can compare them with anything. So if you have all this understanding, it's easier for you to have an objective discussion with your supervisor and maintain that relationship in the long run. Even after you graduate, you can still continue working with them. If you're looking to, let me wait a little bit for the noise to calm down. So if you're looking to continue with the supervisor during the postdoc, then having a very productive, objective relationship will go a long way. But also, if you're planning to just work in academia, your supervisor will play a big role in writing recommendation, and having fruitful discussions with him is really important. So if you're interested, you can comment below. I'll send you a link to the mini version of the workbook that just asks you reflection questions, and we can have fruitful discussions about that. So anyway, thank you for listening about my PhD, and I hope we get this discussion going. So bye bye.